to understand, and we have to put this into context, Philippine foreign policy throughout the beginning of the 21st century has been marred with great inconsistencies as well. And this is, of course, one of the aspects that we have to look into when trying to understand the current situation. However, there have been some certain consistencies, such as from 2010, a transition towards external defense and maritime security. But when it comes to operationalizing our foreign policy today, it's about rerouting our resources, diplomatic and material resources, into a more proactive position where we seek to cement our position in the map as an Indo-Pacific middle power. And that is, of course, something that deals with strengthening, deepening, and broadening our traditional partnerships, but also venturing into our non-traditional partnerships with like-minded countries. But at the same time, this also coincides with the desire of Manila to more overtly secure its sovereignty and sovereign rights based on international law. So with that idea, there is a multi-pronged strategy that is highly interdependent with one another. And this summit in particular provides a significant, is a significant pillar in that proactive strategy, and that is to be able to engage more with our neighbors and also with our dialogue partners as well. So this goes hand in hand with Philippine foreign policy. Right, so looking at it based on the Philippine perspective and the Philippines in ASEAN, the Philippines now has been quite robust in its strategies, particularly, as I've mentioned earlier. It's a two-point strategy. So one is, of course, external oriented to enhance, given our limited capabilities and our resources, we seek to, of course, partner with and deepen and broaden existing partnerships with traditional partners and non-traditional partners. The purpose of this is to first enhance our maritime security capabilities, improve our deterrence capabilities, and of course to ensure that the waters within our EEZ, which we call the West Philippine Sea, a portion of the South China Sea, is constantly open and inclusive and away from the interests of narrowly driven powers to dominate or at least monopolize the area, which is, of course, beyond the premise of international law. So in addition to that, of course, it's also about working with our partners, right? And of course, Manila now recognizes that what we may be doing externally could be considered to be of a concern to some of our neighbors in the region. So, of course, it's very important to create a least common denominator. And I think one of the aspects to this was the Transparency Initiative shift that also considered food security and social economics to be the crux, which would be something relatable for our Southeast Asian neighbors. But when it comes to maritime security, my last point is that it still is quite controversial in Southeast Asia, given the varying threat perceptions, but at least understanding that individuality is very much a key identity in Southeast Asia. The ability to have a joint maritime drill, for example, despite the rerouting of geography and the location, is still an incredible feat. And of course, this shows you that ASEAN seeks to have a more homegrown oriented component or element to their strategy amidst the intensifying power competition. So I believe in that sense, we are able to, of course, not only widen our options with our external partners, but contribute in this way because the Philippines has been more than willing to engage with its counterparts and has been engaging bilaterally as well with Vietnam, Malaysia for a potential resolution to the maritime border conflict. So we're going hand in hand with the DCOC and our desire to be more proactive in the region. The shift has actually occurred. The concept of middle power has been quite shied on. We have often looked the other way when it comes to the idea of the middle power for the past few decades, is because our fixation, the Philippine fixation, was based on its immediate geography in Southeast Asia. And with that, we had this sort of strategic bubble where we just wanted to work with existing tools, whether it is our immediate neighbors or whether with our traditional partner, the US, and the extended hub and spoke system to a certain degree. However, under President Marcos Jr., we can see a more revitalized context in Manila's desire to get itself out there. And this is, of course, in line with the desire of Manila to uphold its responsibilities as a component of the Indo-Pacific, as a very important stabilizing element in the Indo-Pacific. And Manila has been quite overt in contributing its share in preserving what we all call as the rules-based order. And that is, of course, very much important for the Philippine position. I believe President Marcos Jr. Has said this during his trip here in Melbourne. So as we can see, the Philippines now seeks to not only engage, in the Western Pacific, but also at the same time widen its options. And President Marcos Jr. has been saying this again and again. June 6th, 2023, if I'm not mistaken, he had a very important conversation with newly appointed Filipino diplomats. And with that, he emphasized that it is necessary to broaden our security and economic partnerships across the region beyond our traditional scope. And that in itself represents the Philippines to play a more flexible role, a more overt role as an Indo-Pacific middle power, while also upholding the responsibilities that it has as an Indo-Pacific middle power. But of course, we still have some work to do in terms of cementing our position in this particular context. Well, the Philippine-Australia partnership is actually very interesting. If you look into Australia's position in Southeast Asia, it is considered as a natural partner. If we look at it based on the objective aspects, Australia, one of the key powers in the Indo-Pacific now, is one of the few that does not have any strategic axe to grind in the region. It's looked at less controversially. So that in itself is an opportunity for Australia. And of course, under the current administration in Australia, the desire to sort of balance its position between the US and China is a clear signal that it wants to be looked at as an independent force and not merely as an extension of the US-China power competition. And in this way, it would be able to, of course, engage more throughout the region more equitably, right? When it comes to the Philippines, of course, the traditional notion of the Philippines towards Australia is that it is a provider of aid and economic support and developmental assistance. But recently, we have seen Australia willing to play a more robust role in the Indo-Pacific in terms of a security provider as an alternative, as a security partner, as a development partner. And this is, of course, very important, and it converges with the current Philippine foreign policy of working, nonetheless, with like-minded partners. And we have seen how Australia and the Philippines are positioning themselves and their bilateral partnership, which has spanned back for decades throughout, immediately even after the Cold War era. We had a 1990s defense agreement with Australia, and we have the visiting forces agreement with Australia as well. But today, we are looking at the Philippine-Australia bilateral partnership as an independent force on its own, a stabilizing force, which is quite interesting. And of course, the desire to have joint maritime drills in the West Philippine Sea. These are all very important for our partnership with Australia, and I think that the momentum will continue to increase. However, from Australia's side, of course, we would be delighted to have it play a more effective role economically as well, given that economic policies are, of course, at the crux of every Southeast Asian foreign policy. So, of course, we need to, it would be wonderful to have more, an expanded economic cooperation with Australia as well. And I believe that the current administration is doing exactly that, paving towards that direction, realizing that we need to have a multidimensional presence in Southeast Asia amidst these polarizing dynamics. And of course, this coincides really well with Manila's desire to engage within the region. So definitely the partnership is a natural one between the Philippines and Australia, and we do look forward to it strengthening even further in the years to come.